Greetings, friends. Today we have an incredibly cool and informative issue, which we hope will pleasantly surprise you. Hold on to your hats, because today we will dive into a pool of dizzying stories. Foreigners, distant and unknown, like unknown distances, decided to discuss our vast motherland again. The one with her balalaika bears and pancakes the size of a wheel. It means that they are arguing about whether we are really as harsh as they are told, or whether all this is the machinations of enemy spies. Some, as they say, will not lift a finger to figure it out, but others, the real heroes of our time, take and check everything on their own skin. So today, we are going to tell you about a German who has visited Russia and no longer wants to live in Germany. We will tell you how our country conquered him and what Russians do not believe in vain. In general, pour the seagulls. Click on the subscribe button to our channel. Put your thumbs up and fly. And to begin with, we probably did not know that foreigners are so able to feel the Russian soul and write so deeply. If we were shown the following sentences in Russian and asked if German was a native language for a person, we would, without a doubt, answer no. And they would have been mistaken. Judge for yourself, quote, "No wonder they say that Russia is a feminine country. There is something subtly rounded, gentle, and enveloping, literally in everything. From the streets of crooked-walled and merchants' chambers with their necessarily pot-bellied porch, and even evil pointing in the hands of a man in uniform, elastic, but often curly." End quote. Well, what is not a phenomenon? Thanks to the internet, we have the opportunity to get to know the author of these lines better. One of the interviewers asked him questions, to which the German answered very frankly and eloquently. Meet Philip, the author of the blog, Moved from Germany to Russia. In his words, you will take a new look at Russian culture and learn how subtly and figuratively a person who looks at it not from the inside, but from the outside, can write about it. Everything we are going to read next will be in the format of a question and answer interview. So, Philip, I'll start with a banal question. Tell us how you found yourself in Russia. How long have you been living here, and for what reasons did you move here? Since I came out, this question has surpassed in popularity, even the one that has been leading in my personal hit parade for years. Why do you live in Russia? What is worse in Germany? At first, I began to visit Russia more and more often for work, then for business, and in the end, I fell in love with Moscow so much. This crazy and such a cozy city with incredible people that I decided to stay here forever. And I always say, if you want to get the concentrate of Russia undiluted, go to Moscow. Finally, I've been here for 10 years. Is it a little or a lot? I would like more. And the main lures here are the most interesting people, the richest culture, endless opportunities, and boundless expanse. I will not specifically talk about traditional values in spite of the decaying West, so as not to slip into the pop mainstream. Moreover, I already have a reputation for Kremlin agents. How exactly did our country once make you fall in love with yourself? The beauty of nature, maybe language and literature, or even a woman. Has this love passed the test of time and everyday life, or has there been a disappointment? Absolutely, yes. Russian women are the best. The most beautiful, the most sincere, the most feminine. And yes, it's often hinted to me that I'm a horny loser who came here for affordable girls. Making excuses is useless. Think as you like. But seriously, Russia is extremely rich in nature, and the Russian language is incomparable, but the main thing is still people. And I don't divide them into men and women, not to mention the other 51 genders, according to American experts. But local girls are certainly not as easily accessible as you think. The Russian soul is an abyss striving for heaven. What could be more charming? Where else can you be so spiritually enriched? And at the same time, there is a lot of work in Russia, including very promising. And the career here is probably much more rapid than in Germany. That's what I thought while I was healthy. That after the move turned out to be a complete surprise, completely unforeseen circumstances. Both pleasant and unpleasant. This subject is endless. On my channel, I even made a selection comparing Germany and Russia. In general, it turned out to be a surprise that in Russia, almost everyone thinks of themselves as creative people. And not everyone wants to do dirty work. In Germany, any honest work is respected. But it became a discovery that all these iconographic images of Dostoevsky, all Nastasia Filipovna, to Sonia Marmeladova with Raskolnikov and Rogozin, are not just reality without any artistic hyperboles, but your neighbors themselves. It's like being inside a parallel reality, which really, apparently, borders on God. And the most unforeseen circumstance was that last summer I only miraculously survived, and has been terminally ill ever since. It is to this experience that I owe the fact that I started writing. But I do not intend to return to Germany, where the disabled are waiting for the so-called communal paradise without hassle and worries. I'm staying. How do you live in Russia now? What do you do? Where do you work? I don't work anywhere. It will sound most impressive. You can put it right in the title. And if I can't work without self-irony bordering on sarcasm, which for me, as a workaholic, is a disaster. Before I almost died, I was preparing a huge project with a partner. Insanely interesting and promising. But overnight, everything had to be buried, almost like a part of his body. After a couple of months of tormenting myself with finding and setting up therapy, thanks to which I am alive, but not whole, I realized that something had to be done. And since my stories from the life of my European friends who visited me in Russia were very popular, I realized it was time to write them down. That's how my blog started. I had not written in Russian before. Now I try to do it as professionally as possible, 2 or 3 articles a day plus communication with subscribers, to whom I necessarily respond. It goes up to 40 hours a week, which in my condition is almost fantastic. And I live on donates, thanks to my readers. Do you travel to Germany often? Do you feel nostalgic for your homeland? Now I can't even leave the house, I don't have the opportunity. Previously, at one time I lived in an airplane at all. Many flight attendants have already recognized me by sight. You, as usual, have 2 lunches. They asked me, what is the main difference in the mentality of Russians and Germans, can you name? Just one thing. In general, we have a lot of different things, but surprisingly a lot in common. But if you listen and choose one single item, Russian is not afraid of the last questions, like what is the meaning of life? The question with which my old Bavarian friend in Vladimir was put out of action for several hours. The story about this became my second article at the very beginning of blogging. The Russians are a surprisingly deep and childishly fearless people. The Germans consider many things too intimate to discuss with those who are not the closest. Did you have any stereotypes about Russia and the locals who collapsed after moving? Yes, they were. It seemed to me that boundless local opportunities were obvious to everyone in Russia. Take-off opportunities for any hard-working enthusiast. But it turned out that many Russians do not believe in this and even scold me for telling fairy tales, they say. No, only the past. And nothing fictional. Apart from a couple of artistic experiences on my channel, exercises for me, and who threatens to become a writer one day. But in these essays, there is just nothing about the material at all. I can't ignore the Russian cuisine. Which dish do you like the most and which, once tasted, you will never eat again? Russian cuisine is one of the main imperial cuisines of the world, like Persian, Chinese, or French. There is an insanely much mixed in it, it is infinitely variable, and it is simply impossible to single out just 1 or 2 dishes. But I really like fish caught in the river or even sea. For example, Kamchatka crab. It's just divine. But I won't eat any more jelly. There is something unusual about it, meat jelly, it's not mine. I'm afraid it's something personal. After that, an unexpected question from a subscriber. What kind of beer do you prefer? German, Russian, or maybe Czech? Only Bavarian. Only hardcore. Go to hell, and that's it. Go to monastery near Munich, and try the fresh beer there with giant brezels. And the questions will disappear. But I can't drink, the doctor forbade me. Since my blog is about the Russian language, let's touch on this topic as well. What is the most difficult thing for you in learning Russian? Maybe there were some curious cases associated with a misunderstanding of the meaning of words. Russian can be studied endlessly, just like English. To teach, but not to master it, especially in perfection. This applies equally to both non-carriers and carriers. I'm sure at first I was given all sorts of reservations in Russia. Somewhere on the channel there are even major hits. But then the language became much better. And if earlier I was sure that the tracing paper from the German I picked up means I dialed the wrong number, now I can easily distinguish all the shades of Tony. What Russian word would you call the most difficult? And what rule of the Russian language had to be remembered for a very long time? I'm still confused about the most primitive things cha and cha. And the rule is clear, and I am capable of languages, but so far it does not lend itself. And I also build too long, complicated sentences in the German way. In principle, Russian is generally very complex. And the most difficult Russian word I would call aha. After all, anything can be hidden behind it, from a firm yes to a categorical no and all the intermediate semitones. Do you know and use Russian proverbs and sayings in your speech? Which ones do you like the most? I try to remember everything that comes across. There are a lot more of them than in German. And I consider the unforgettable round from the movie Brother to be my teacher inspire. Who has not been to Moscow has not seen beauty. Or, for example, not the one who has a lot of goodness is happy, but the one whose wife is faithful. And you can't argue. In continuation of the topic, are there any German proverbs that, when translated into Russian, will cause surprise or misunderstanding among Russians? Haha, I think it's worth highlighting rather the word salalala, a kind of saying, which means so-so, average, not very. It sounds and looks very un-German. And the scandalous aus ho, innern fui wow on the outside, but so-so on the inside. I know that you love Russian literature and often write about it in a blog. Which Russian writer or poet is your favorite, and why? An ungrateful question, with which you risk incurring the righteous wrath of readers on me. More precisely, of course, I'm taking a risk. With your answer. In fact, I'm not that well-read at all. I just grasp everything easily. And an analyst by nature, and therefore I easily conjugate even things that are very far from each other. But let them beat. For example, here is the spiritual Dostoevsky and the spiritual Tolstoy. I can't choose who is better for me, although I tend to the first one. But of those who stand apart, Bunin is for the language. And Platonov. This is a block of utopian fairy tale in the folk way and an endless source of special, sincere, and selfless aesthetics. I know that many people in Russia dislike him. But this is pure genius according to the formula, my rap is a prayer, but with a razor in my mouth. And of the poets, since we're talking about rap, Mayakovsky. What power, what originality. This is a very unusual interview from a really, so to speak, gifted foreigner who has delved very deeply into Russian culture and art. This is the issue we got. And what do you think about all this? Write your opinion in the comments and do not hesitate in your expressions. And also do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube and Telegram channel and put your thumbs up, because in this way you help our channel in promotion.